The day Iris found out her mother had sold her debt to a man she'd never met, she was standing in the break room of a parking garage accounting office, eating a gas station sandwich and pretending the fluorescent light above her wasn't about to blow. She found out the way she found out most things. A piece of paper, numbers that didn't add up, and then slowly the sick realization that they did. The envelope had been left on her desk. No stamp, no return address. Just her name, Iris Veld, written in the kind of handwriting that belonged to someone who never had to rush. Inside was a single page, a transfer of debt agreement. Her mother's signature at the bottom, notarized 3 weeks ago. Iris read it twice. Then she ate the rest of her sandwich. Then she read it a third time. The number was $214,000. She'd known her mother had borrowed money. She hadn't known how much. She hadn't known from whom. And she absolutely had not known that somewhere buried in the fine print of whatever her mother had signed 18 months ago was a clause, half a page, single-spaced, that named Iris as secondary guarantor. She was 28 years old. She made $41,000 a year before taxes. She drove a 2009 Civic with a cracked dashboard and a passenger-side window that only went down, never up. And apparently, she owed a man named Vane $214,000. She spent the next 4 days trying to find a lawyer who would return her calls. None of them did. She spent the day after that at the library, pulling up everything she could find on debt transfer law, guarantor clauses, and whether any of this was actually legal. It was, mostly, with caveats, with conditions she didn't have the vocabulary to fully pass. The kind of legal language designed to make sure that people like her stayed confused and people like whoever Vane was stayed comfortable. She found one article, buried in a 3-year-old business journal, that mentioned a Callum Vane in connection with a federal inquiry into a shipping conglomerate operating out of the Gulf Coast. The inquiry had been dropped. The article didn't say why. She found a photo. It wasn't a good one, taken from a distance, slightly blurred, the kind that ends up in a newspaper because it's the only one that exists. He was coming down the steps of what looked like a federal courthouse, not in handcuffs, wearing a dark coat. He wasn't looking at the camera. He wasn't looking at anything in particular. He looked like a man who had already decided how everything was going to go. Iris stared at the photo for a long time. Then she closed the browser tab, drove home, and did not sleep. The office address on the agreement was in a building downtown that didn't have a sign, just a floor number, 17. She went on a Thursday morning because she figured if something bad was going to happen to her, it was less likely to happen on a Thursday morning. She was probably wrong about that. The elevator opened onto a lobby that was quieter than it had any right to be. Marble floor. 2 men near the windows who were not doing anything specific but were clearly doing something. A woman at a desk who looked at Iris the way a person looks at something unexpected. Not alarmed, just recalibrating. "I'm here to see Vane," Iris said. "He sent me a document. I have questions about it." The woman at the desk looked at her for a long moment. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but he has $214,000 of mine, so I figured that counted for something." Another pause. The woman picked up a phone, said something Iris couldn't hear, and then set it back down. 3rd door on the left. The office smelled like old wood and something faintly chemical that Iris eventually identified as gun oil. She filed that away and kept her face neutral. Vane was standing at the window when she came in, not sitting behind the desk like a normal person. Standing, looking out at a city that presumably did whatever he told it to. He turned around when she closed the door. He was taller than the photo suggested. Older, too, mid-40s maybe, with the kind of face that had been lived in hard. A scar ran along his jaw on the left side, pale and deliberate-looking. His hands, when he finally moved toward the desk, were the hands of someone who had done things with them that didn't belong in polite conversation. He sat down. He didn't offer her a seat. She took one. Anyway, something shifted in his expression, not amusement exactly, more like he'd just marked something in a ledger. "You're the daughter," he said. "I'm Iris Veld," she said, "and I want to talk about this." She set the transfer agreement on the desk between them. He glanced at it, not like he needed to read it. like he was confirming it was the one he expected. Your mother signed a loan agreement with a clause naming you as guarantor in the event she defaulted, he said. She defaulted. I know what happened. What I want to know is why you think I owe you anything, because you signed. I didn't sign anything. Page 4, he said. Line 31. Your signature. Iris went very still. She'd read page 1, page 2, the top of page 3, where her mother's name was printed and her signature appeared at the bottom. She had not read page 4 because she'd been standing in a break room eating a gas station sandwich, and she had not. She picked up the agreement, turned to page 4. There it was. Her signature, or rather, a near-perfect copy of it, close enough that she could see exactly where someone had studied her handwriting and reproduced it. The loop of the I was slightly too wide. The V in Veld leaned the wrong direction by maybe 3 degrees. She set the paper back down. That's not my signature, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. Vane looked at her. It's a very good copy, she continued. The I is wrong, and the V leans left. Mine leans right. I'm left-handed, which means my natural lean goes. She stopped. If you have a pen and a piece of paper, I can show you. He opened a desk drawer and slid both across to her without looking away from her face. She wrote her name, slowly. Then again, faster. Then she set the pen down and turned the paper so he could see it. The V leaned right both times, consistently. He looked at the paper, then at the agreement, then at Iris. Who did the notarization? She asked. Someone my people trusted. Well, either your people trusted the wrong someone, or someone forged my signature and submitted it to a notary who didn't look too carefully. She folded her hands in her lap. Either way, I didn't sign that document, and I don't owe you $214,000. Silence. Outside, somewhere below 17 floors of marble and gun oil and quiet, the city continued doing whatever it did. Vane said, Your mother told me you were good with numbers. She told you about me. She talked about you quite a bit. He paused. I don't think she meant to mention the accounting skills. It came up. Iris thought about her mother, about the phone calls she'd stopped returning, about Christmas 2 years ago, and the thing her mother had said at the dinner table that Iris still heard sometimes when she was trying to fall asleep. What exactly did she borrow the money for? Iris asked. Her boyfriend's restaurant. She closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Of course she did. It closed 8 months ago. Of course it did. She went home. She called her mother. Her mother did not answer, which was not a surprise. Her mother had a talent for not answering calls when answering them would require her to explain something. Iris sat on her kitchen floor, not the chair, the floor, because sometimes that's the only surface that makes sense, and looked at the ceiling and did the math. $214,000. At her current salary, after taxes, after rent, after her car insurance and her student loans from a degree she'd finished in 3.5 years because she couldn't afford 4. After her utilities and the prescription she paid out of pocket every month because her insurance had a gap she'd never figured out how to close. She could pay it back in approximately 47 years. She was 28. She would be 75. She started laughing. Not the good kind. Vane's office called her the next morning. Not the woman from the desk. A different voice, male, brisk, the kind of voice that had been trained to give information without providing comfort. He wanted to meet again. She almost said no. She thought about it for the full 30 seconds it took her to walk from her bedroom to the kitchen and pour coffee that was already old. Then she said yes, because the alternative was 47 years. He was sitting behind the desk this time. That felt like a small concession to normalcy. He slid a folder across the desk before she sat down. She opened it. It was a contract, a different one. 2 pages, not 4. Cleaner language. She read it twice before she looked up. You want me to work for you, she said. I want someone to audit 18 months of accounts receivable for 3 of my operations. The person I had doing it is no longer available. Iris did not ask why the person was no longer available. These operations, she said carefully, are they? Some of them are legitimate. And the others? The others are managed carefully. She looked back at the folder. This says the debt would be considered settled upon completion of the audit. Correct. And how long would that take? That depends on how good you are. She thought about the V leaning right, about page 4, line 31, about the fact that she had walked into this building on a Thursday morning because she'd thought it was safer. And somehow she was now sitting across from a man who ran things she wasn't going to name out loud, being offered a way out of a debt she hadn't legally incurred, to do the one thing she was actually good at, that the original debt is void. Not deferred, void. Signed by you, notarized by someone I choose, a pause. Fine, he said, and I want access to the accounts directly, not filtered through anyone else on your end. If someone is skimming, I need to be able to see all of it. Another pause, longer this time. That's not standard. I'm not a standard auditor. She closed the folder. If you wanted standard, you'd have found someone with a proper office and a LinkedIn profile. You didn't. You sent me a piece of paper with a forged signature, which tells me you needed someone specific. She looked at him. I want to know why. He leaned back in his chair. The scar along his jaw caught the light from the window. He had the eyes of someone who slept very little and had made peace with that. The last auditor, he said slowly, found something he wasn't supposed to find, and he chose to profit from the information rather than report it. Iris looked at him steadily. You want someone who'll report it. I want someone who understands that the people skimming from me are the ones creating the danger in this building. Not me. She thought about that. It wasn't comfort exactly. It wasn't reassurance. It was just a different kind of math. Here is the risk, here are the variables, here is what honesty costs, and what dishonesty costs more. She understood that kind of math. Okay, she said. The accounts were a disaster. Not in an obvious way. In the kind of way that only shows up when you've been staring at the same spreadsheet for 9 hours. And you notice that one column's totals are rounding consistently in the same direction, which shouldn't happen, which statistically almost never happens by accident, which means someone had written a formula they didn't expect anyone to check. Iris checked it. She was given a desk in a room on the 14th floor that had a window and no other furniture, except a cot that suggested someone had anticipated long hours. She worked 14-hour days for the first week. She ordered food from a diner 2 blocks away and left the containers stacked neatly in the corner because she kept forgetting to throw them out. By the second week, she had found 3 discrepancies. By the third, 11. By the fourth, she had found the name. She stared at the name for a long time. Then she printed the report, put it in a folder, and took the elevator to 17. Vane was in his office when he knocked. He looked up, looked at the folder. Sit down, he said. She didn't. The amounts are in the report. The method was a rounding formula applied across 6 sub-accounts over 16 months. Whoever did it was careful. They kept each individual instance below the threshold that would trigger an automatic flag. But the cumulative total is just under $90,000. She set the folder on the desk. The name attached to the accounts is someone in your supply chain, a man named Holt. Something went through his expression that she couldn't fully read. It wasn't surprise. It was something colder and more specific than surprise. You're certain, he said. I printed the formula. It's on page 3. She paused. What happens to him? Vane looked at her. To him, she said. I'd like to know. Why? Because I found him, and I'd rather not spend the next however many weeks wondering. He was quiet for a moment. He'll be removed from the operation. That's not specific. No, he agreed. It's not. Iris looked at the folder, at her own handwriting in the margins, the neat columns, the highlighted cells. She had learned to keep her head down. She had learned that most situations resolved themselves if you waited long enough and asked the right questions at the right moment. He has a wife, she said. Kids, probably. There's a family health plan in the benefits accounts. I know. I'm not asking you to be kind to him. She met his eyes. I'm asking you to make sure whatever happens to him is because of what he did, not because of who found him. He looked at her for a long moment. The city was quiet outside. Someone in the hallway passed the door without stopping. All right, he said. She finished the audit in 6 weeks and 4 days. 11 people had been skimming in some form or another. 3 of them were significant. The rest were small, the kind of small that happens when people are underpaid and undersupervised and think no one is paying attention. She noted all of them. She did not weight them by how she felt about the people involved. She had a method and she used it. On the last day, she printed the final report, bound it with a binder clip, and took it upstairs. Vane was on the phone when she came in. He held up one finger. She sat down. In the chair this time, the one she'd started taking every time without waiting to be offered it, sometime around week 3. He finished the call. "It's done," she said, and set the report on his desk. He opened it, didn't read it, not then, just looked at the first page. The summary, the number at the top, $312,000, he said, across 11 accounts, 16 months. She paused. "You were losing more than you knew." "Yes. Your original auditor found the first 3, the small ones." She kept her voice even. He didn't find the rest because he was too busy figuring out how to use what he had. Vane looked up from the report. "You're telling me he was working with someone," he said. "I'm telling you the pattern of what he found and what he didn't find is not consistent with thoroughness. It's consistent with strategy." She held his gaze. "That's in the report. Page 7. Silence. "You could have left that out," he said. "Yes. Why didn't you?" She thought about it. "Because it's accurate," she said, "and because you needed to know it, and because—" She stopped. Started again. "Because I've spent most of my working life around people who told partial truths and called it discretion. I don't like it." He was quiet for a moment. Then he opened the desk drawer, slid a document across to her. She picked it up. It was the original transfer agreement. Across the front in ink, in handwriting that was smaller and more controlled than she'd expected from him, void. Settled in full, his signature. Notarized, she noticed, with a seal she didn't recognize, not the same notary as the original. She looked up. "I told you I'd choose the notary," she said. "You did." A pause. "The seal is from a firm in the Loop. They're legitimate. You can verify it." She looked at the seal again. She'd learned in 6 weeks to tell the difference between things Vane said because he wanted her to feel better and things he said because they were true. This was the second kind. She folded the document and put it in her bag. "What happened to the original notary?" she asked. "The one who certified my forged signature." "He retired," Vane said. Suddenly, Iris nodded slowly. She didn't ask for clarification. Some questions had answers she already knew the shape of. She stood up. "Then I think we're done." She was halfway to the door when he said her name. Not the daughter. Not Miss Veld. Just Iris. She turned around. "The position," he said. "The one you've been doing for 6 weeks. I'd like to make it permanent." She looked at him. "That wasn't in the agreement." "No," he agreed. "This would be a new agreement. A real one. No forged signatures, no secondary guarantors. A salary, a real one, and full access to the accounts as you've had them." He paused. "And the ability to refuse any assignment you find." He seemed to search for the word inadvisable. "Inadvisable," she repeated. "Within reason." She stood there. The elevator was 20 feet away. Her car was in a garage 3 blocks south. Her apartment had a kitchen floor she'd sat on in the dark, and a cracked dashboard she'd been meaning to get fixed for 2 years, and a window that only went down. She thought about 47 years. She thought about page 4, line 31, and a V that leaned the wrong direction. She thought about what it felt like to hand someone a report that was completely, entirely, defensibly accurate, and watch them read it and know that there was nothing they could take from it that wasn't true. She thought about the way he'd said all right when she asked him to make sure whatever happened to Holt was about Holt, not about her. She turned back around. "I want the inadvisable clause in writing," she said. "Specific language. Not a general carve-out, fine, and I choose my own notary, obviously, and my salary is not the same as the auditor who—" "It isn't," he said. She walked back to the chair and sat down. "Then let's talk," she said. He reached for a pad of paper. He wrote 3 numbers, slid it across. She looked at them. "The middle one," she said. He took the pad back, crossed out the top number and the bottom one. Outside, the city was doing what it did. 17 floors below, people were moving through it without knowing that in an office that smelled like old wood and gun oil, A woman who was very good at finding things that were hidden was about to become the only person in this building who understood exactly what everyone owed and to whom. That suited her fine. She was good at keeping books.